then many people who are displaced are not in trouble. Many of those have good alternatives. Some of them will benefit from it. There are some who will be in distress, of course, but there are always people who are in distress for all sorts of reasons. In a dynamic society, demands are going up here, demands are going up there.
Quick reaction to that.
Why would you want to return to a concept that this country had in 1900? Why would you want to return to where a few control the economic destiny of every working man and woman?
It's exactly the other way, Mr. Deason. The best way to limit the control of a few is free trade on a worldwide basis. There is no measure whatsoever that would do more to prevent private monopoly development than complete free trade. It would be far more effective than all the antitrust suits in the world.
I totally disagree. You would wind up with a situation like in the movie Rollerball, where corporations carved out their spheres of economic influence throughout the world and controlled everything. It would be controlled by corporations in its entirety.
The second phase of this transition was the wave of deregulation and privatization that this concentrated wealth was able to force through. Starting in the late 1970s, under pressure from this newly consolidated elite, governments began to dismantle legislation limiting the accumulation of monopoly power in all aspects of the economy and society. From telecommunications to advertising, from the media to pharmaceuticals and finance. At the same time, laws restricting the practices and regulating the conduct of corporations were repealed, and the power of the market was unleashed.
I'm not in favor of no government intervention. I never have been.
What is the role of government in relation to the market economy? Do you want to see governments, as it were, enforcing competition by chasing down monopoly, restrictive practices, and all the rest in the society?
I feel the government properly acts in that area. The government must be there to ensure competition.
The government's not smart enough. Look at the antitrust law. You talk about the implementation of antitrust regulations in the United States between the Department of Justice and the FTC. It's a patchwork mess. There isn't any logic to it. People don't know what to do. They can't get answers. They're inhibited from mergers and consolidations that would make a lot of sense from the standpoint of the consumer.
And would make even more sense from the point of multinational corporations.
From France to the Philippines, from Jamaica to Japan, from Malaysia to Mexico, from Sri Lanka to Singapore, privatization is on the move.
Accompanying this deregulation, governments embarked on massive programs of privatization that transferred public property to private hands at fire sale prices, further expanding the scope, scale, and power of these vast monopolies. Infrastructure and services that were once publicly owned were consumed by the growing kleptocracy and rented back at monopoly prices to the people who had paid to build them. As the growth of transnational capital flows eroded the tax bases that governments could draw on, the financial class pushed more privatization as the only solution to save public finances. This one-off fire sale of state assets would be marketed to the public as popular capitalism.
Popular capitalism is nothing less than a crusade to enfranchise the many in the economic life of the nation. We conservatives are returning power to the people. That is the way to one nation, one people.
The illusory economic growth of the 1980s and 90s was a side effect of treating the real economy, the productive economy, like a corporation in liquidation.
The 1% makes most of its money by lending money to the 99% and making the 99% pay debt service to itself. The 1% own most of the bonds of banks, meaning ownership of the banks, and they essentially use their income to buy more and more assets. They don't use their income to buy new factories or to make new means of production. They may buy out a company, and then they'll downsize the labor force, they'll wipe out the pension obligations, they'll dismantle the factory and turn it into gentrified housing.
Short-term profits exploded as vast savings were made by laying off workers and repealing consumer safety, environmental protection, and antitrust legislation. This was seen as an absolute proof of the inherent superiority of the neoliberal model.
I am not a destroyer of companies. I am a liberator of them. The point is, ladies and gentlemen, that greed, for lack of a better word, is good. Greed is right. Greed works.